Welcome to the Peretz Performance Podcast. My name is Tyler Peretz. I am your host, and today I will say it's probably the real episode number one. If you watched the prelude, that was a little introduction. But today I am very honored to have our first guest, a very good friend of mine, Mr. Matthew Manos. Matt, what's going on, dude?
Not much. I'm happy that this is happening. I pushed you to start the podcast, but to me, this kind of just feels like circle of life or whatever, because I was a guest on Ben Rackey's podcast, who's a mutual friend of ours. Shout out Run Club. And I was nervous when I first was on that podcast. I'm like, man, I hate this feeling of like nervousness. And I was like, what's the recipe? How do I remedy this? And I thought maybe I just have to start my own podcast. And he pushed me to do it. And after, like looking into the software and the microphone and all that stuff and all those details, I was like, okay, how bad could this be? And it's been a good venture myself. I think I just recorded my 28th episode yesterday, and you've been on 2 or 3 of them yourself. But it's nice to see you start this journey yourself, and I hope you gain as much out of it as I did, because for me, it's just like the best version of networking. You get to make friends with other coaches that you can respect, as opposed to like getting in a room and you trade business cards and you're like, oh yeah, whatever. Just feels a little sleazy if you're trying to use it like transactionally. But here you're just making friends, and I like that you're like building community, because a lot of people will think competition, competition, competition. There are too many people in the world that need training, and the more good trainers you can find, like that's good. And then the other thing too is I'm not everybody's cup of tea. Not everybody would be perfect for me as a client. So it's nice. Anyway, all that to say, I'm excited to do this. I'm happy you're doing this, and I hope this is a really fun journey for you.
Yeah, man, this has been fun. So I said it in the first episode before we really start getting into the depth of everything, that the reason that I started this is because of Matt. So if this gets canceled at any point, which I don't know, hopefully not, but or if this takes off, this is all kudos to Matt. So he was the one who kept pushing me to do this.
Yeah, I'll get the blame if it goes bad, and I'll get the credit if it's successful.
Yeah, it's honestly it's a win-win. It's great publicity, win-win. There's no bad publicity. Matt, so obviously you being the first guest, you're kind of setting the precedent for everybody else. So the bar is set high. So if you want to just kind of tell everybody who's listening or watching or tuning in, wherever it might be from, if you kind of talk about your background, how you gotten into the strength conditioning world and your journey basically to where you've gotten to now.
Yeah. So first off, I just want to say that one of the really nice things about being the first guest is that Tyler said off air that I was his most handsome, intelligent guest so far. But I don't think that really means anything. So anyway, just to go off what you were saying for my background, yeah, I was a soccer player. I started a little bit later. The average kid that goes and plays in college probably starts as soon as they can walk, kicking a little ball around with their family. I cared more about like gymnastics and martial arts as a kid, individual sports and all that stuff. And then, like I thought maybe I should do team sport. Maybe it helps me make friends. I didn't have like the most friends growing up. Also, my dad was a competitive soccer player himself. He's from France, which that's the national sport in France. And I thought maybe if I play this sport, we'll have something to talk about. And so I started. It was fine. It was just like any other sport, right? And what really gave me the drive was I started at 9 years old playing rec. At 13, I started playing, travel club, whatever you want to say, which is pretty late to be playing at a competitive level. And it wasn't a high competitive level either. In middle school, I had to like really work my way up. The thing that really gave me the drive was I don't like being bad at things. And I was bad at it. I was a fast kid. I had a left foot. I worked really hard. So people just put me at left back, which is kind of like, that position where it's like you do all the dog work, but you're not known for your skill, your creativity, anything like that. So I was just a workhorse. My mentality's always been to like prove people wrong. If I ever beat people early on in life in anything, it was because it was like attrition. If it was ping pong, I might not beat you for 10 games in a row and I beat you on the 11th, and I can finally feel good about myself. Like that's how I was wired early on. And so everyone was like, you're not very good, blah, blah, blah. So I just like got the bug for training based on trying to prove people wrong. And it's like chip on my shoulder. It would be midnight and I would like be pumping out push-ups and chin-ups and sit-ups and trying to like not make too much noise so I don't get screamed at by my parents who are in like the room over. So like if I'm huffing and puffing, I'm like just trying to breathe quietly and all that stuff. And then, like, I know you've talked about it, bodybuilding.com, T Nation, all that stuff. It's part of the generic story arc of a strength coach. And I think the other thing too is like, we see the benefits of strength training, or just training in general, and it takes us further than if we hadn't done anything. But then maybe we didn't quite make it to, professional level, for example. And it's like, what do I do with all this knowledge and all this passion? It's like, I want to help the next generation. So I didn't have the best coaches. And I just thought, man, if I could be the coach that I always wanted, then at least like there's still purpose to that. So anyway, all this to say that I wasn't a skilled player. I got cut from JV my freshman and sophomore year, if that gives any indication of how like not great at soccer I was at one point. I didn't try out my junior year. I just focused on club and training. And then I tried out senior year. made the team, committed to a D3 college in Virginia. And then I was the only person from my graduating class, men and women's program for soccer to play college soccer. So I kind of felt like I at least caught up with people, even though I was very late to the party. The college career was okay. I was a bit of a fringe player. And I wish I knew now what I knew then because I think I would have done better. After I graduated, I was like, yeah, same thing that you were talking about, like men against boys, when you're a freshman. And we had some like Viking recruits. We had a lot of Scandinavian guys who came over and they're these big, scary dudes. And, I'm still not huge now. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to lift, get strong. It'll help with my performance, all that. But I didn't know anything about like general adaptation syndrome, which is one of the most fundamental principles of training. Training doesn't make you better. It's just a stimulus. Recovery to that training can make you better. And people talk about overtraining. I think it's overused. Usually it's under recovering. I think I was definitely doing at least one or both of those things. Uh, we would have 4 or 5 practices a week, 1 or 2 games a week. I would do 3 or 4 skill sessions a week on my own for like an hour to 2 hours. And then maybe 3 or 4 like weightlifting sessions for 90 minutes, 2 hours or something like that. And then I'd sleep 5 hours a night and, I wouldn't eat the best. So had I done a fewer sessions, eaten a sandwich, taken a nap, maybe I would have been better recovered, had a better career, all that stuff. All this is a long-winded way to say that I learned about the value of strength training, especially, and not overdoing it, trying to be smart about it, as opposed to just more is better. Better is actually better in college, and then became a soccer coach, uh, coached club and high school. Didn't like the pay, didn't like the hours, didn't like the youth sports culture, which you can totally go down that road if you want to. Really liked the high school side, but like you get a couple $1,000s a year for it, so you can't live off of it. And while I was doing that, I got my CSCS. After that, I was like, okay, I'm going to transition. I can still coach people. And I was thinking I would enjoy it if, do you know who Paul Favorites is? The PGF Performance. I was thinking like, oh, that's my dream. I'm going to be niche. I'm going to do skills training and performance training, but the soccer version, right? And so then my wife went her to get her master's degree in Cincinnati. I got an apartment with her. We were living together. I got my CSCS. I was looking for internships. I got one, and that's also how I met Ben. We were both in Cincinnati at that point in time. Clay Mefford was my mentor. I was at a strength and conditioning facility called Proforce, a lot of middle school, high school athletes. And then I really got the bug for that. Really wanted to work strength conditioning and kind of get that little experience before I started doing performance and skills. I moved back home during COVID. Nobody was hiring. And then I'm like, all right, well, I got to work. I got to make money. I had some power blocks. I had a car. Car has a trunk. Power blocks in the trunk. Drive to people's homes. Mobile personal training business. It took a little while to get off the ground, probably 2 years to get to being fully booked. But here we are 5 years later. I'm able to purchase a house with my wife. I have I think, a nice home gym. And I'm splitting my time between mobile training and personal training there, mostly for Gen Pop, but also maybe 20% athletes. Really long-winded way to say that, like, yeah, started in sports and I just kind of transitioned, but coaching really is my passion. Doesn't really matter if it's with a kettlebell, with a barbell, with a ball at your foot, sprinting, jumping. Like, I just like helping people.
No, yeah, man. I know. Also, disclose, Matt and I are very good friends. So I kind of knew a lot of Matt over the last year or so, almost about a year. I think the summertime last year is where we kind of really connected, and we connected through Ben. But just a lot of stuff. One, even going back to your youth days, the connection. I feel like we've had a lot of similarities in our upbringings. With having basically playing the sport that a parent played, or our dad specifically. Your dad was a soccer player, and that's kind of how the two of you bonded. I wholeheartedly feel the same way with my dad, especially him, being a basketball coach. I played for him in college. He coached my eighth grade travel team the same time he was coaching a college team. So, he went from coaching 23-year-olds to 13-year-olds on the same day. Didn't have too much of a difference between the language he used, but having, that sport, or essentially our sport, kind of be what brought us together. And then I don't know if you mentioned it today. I know you've mentioned it before, but like, I know in college, first of all, shout out D3, because I was a D3 basketball player. So D3 is no joke, by the way. And I think the conference that you played in too, the ODAC, is no joke as well. That is an amazing conference.
Mhm. I was actually USA South. I was USA South, but yeah, I mean,
Oh,
basically
okay.
bordering.
Still, you're down in that Virginia area. I'm gonna throw it in there. But, playing at the Division 3 level and then kind of getting into a little more of like the sport coaching and then making that transition. But I also remember that you said your degree wasn't in like exercise phys or sport. I think you were very similar to me, like you were in the business world in general. And then later in life, you kind of got to that transition. So getting first into it, what was that transition like essentially when you were doing the sport coaching with the youth sports? And we could definitely dive down into that with the youth sport and high school doing the actual sport specific coaching before you got into the strength conditioning realm. Kind of what was that transition like in that point of your
Yeah, that's a
life?
good question. Yeah, so that's a good question. When I was an athlete in high school and college, and I really wanted to pursue playing at a professional level, enjoyed so in soccer, we use the term TTPP, which is technical, tactical, physical, psychological, and I thought I need to master these 4 things if I wanna be the greatest coach ever. I almost wanna be like a one-stop shop. So if I was ever like I also had aspirations at one point to be, if not a professional player, a professional coach. My dream would have been to have done both, have your playing career and then go on and be a coach and all that stuff. So I was aggressive about trying to get all the certs. Even in, like, the coaching world, you can get your USSF licenses, your badges, DCBA, and then you need an A to be a professional coach, and I was like, I'm gonna be the youngest person ever to get all these certs and all the ambition and all that stuff. All this to say that, like, I, for fun, would read like sports psych books, right? Even though, like, I'm not a psychologist. My wife is a psychologist, or she would say a mental health counselor, but she works in that realm and all that stuff. I find it fascinating. The technical side of sports, I loved skill acquisition. Like, I honestly would prefer when it came to training, like lifting's fun and all that stuff. Getting under a barbell was never as fun for me as, like, right now I'm doing combat sports. Kicking a heavy bag, love it. Doing jujitsu with people and trying new techniques, and as long as I'm not getting like ragdolled too bad, love it as well. I always liked almost like skill sessions was almost my favorite thing, almost more than games sometimes. But training, I saw the value in that as well. So, yeah, tactical. I would watch film. I'd study other players. The technical. I do all the skills work, psychological, physical, all those things. So it wasn't hard for me to transition from coaching in one domain, right, to the other because I always felt I was well rounded in both. And I find that coaching, strength and conditioning, personal training, whatever you want to use for that style, where it's more exercise and fitness and stuff, you still need the psychological aspect. And in fact, that may be the most important thing with coaching people. Everyone thinks it's the X's and O's, and it's not. It's how can you connect to somebody, communicate with them, and get them to actually do the thing. Because it doesn't matter if it's a college athlete or it's a 50-year-old woman who's never deadlifted before, they have to buy in, right? And that's a buzzword that's thrown around all the time. For me, it's just communicating value or establishing trust, whatever you want to say it is. And I got that from coaching sport. I actually loved it when I was a sport coach for the high school team. The kids wanted to be there. There was a sense of pride. If you won a game and you scored a goal, you get to walk around and like you're like hot shit the next day at school. And maybe the girls will have a crush on you if you're the sports star or whatever. But like if you're an 8-year-old kid when I was coaching club and it's cold and it's the weekend and you want to be playing Fortnite and drinking hot cocoa, you want to be there on the field, they didn't have the same drive. So with the high school team, man, I had fun just like trying to figure out a kid's like whatever that button was. And then like pushing the button in the right moment. So if it was like a kind of shy, nerdy kid, you have to build them up, tell them that they're a stud, put your arm around them, make them feel like they have your confidence. If it's a player that like doesn't get a lot of minutes, you tell them all the things they did well. You talk about their intent, their attitude, whatever. Sometimes you like praise them up in front of the good kids who maybe try to be nonchalant and they're trying to be too cool and all that stuff. With those kids, sometimes you gotta give them a kick in the ass, right? And I've definitely overdone that a little bit. But like that was so fun for me, the psychological side. It was like if a kid didn't track back in a game, I would say the most popular kid, the captain, whoever it was, I don't care. I'd be like, "Oh, you think you're too good? You think you're cooler than everybody else on the team? That everybody else is going to do the dirty work, but you're not." And I was like, "Listen, if you want to be involved in the team, like, there's a pretty spot on the bench right there for you." And like, that was always a fun thing for me. So all this stuff just kind of like carried over. The thing that was difficult, as you would understand now, was getting the CSCS. It's a difficult certification. So coming from I was a marketing major, right? Coming from a business marketing background, going into like a scientific realm, which was never really my strongest subject in school, I just forced myself to read the book cover to cover with words I did not understand. And I was like, okay, well, if I reread it enough, maybe one day it'll make sense. So I've read that book cover to cover several times in a row. And then I would watch videos trying to get explanations on YouTube to make it, simpler. And I bought all these like study materials. But the thing that like really, really helped was, and I told you about it, was Mario Kart and the CSCS Pocket Prep app. A Mario Kart race took a couple minutes, and the test, like you do like a 10-question quiz, and it tells you what areas you like were lacking in and what chapters in the book to reread. I would just like do a race, do a quiz. If I missed anything, I'd go to that area of the book and read it, and then do a race. And that was just a way to like break up the studying, because otherwise it's such a pain in the ass sometimes. You just crack open a textbook, you don't understand the words. and to just sit there uninterrupted for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever. I just broke it up and I was just like, yeah, I know it sounds stupid, but yeah, Mario Kart helped me pass the CSCS first time. And the thing that's actually kind of funny is that I got a better score in the scientific foundations part of it than I did the like practical and applied section, even though that was easier for me, just because I really locked in there. Having said that, I've never taught someone what the Krebs cycle is since I got my test. So like it's important to study, but at the end of the day, like people talk about the science of coaching or the art of coaching, they both matter. Your clients don't care that deeply about the science of coaching. And if you can explain it to them simply, or they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense, like conceptually, then that's all you really need to know. Unless you want to go into like a sports science background, then sure. So, yeah, it was a natural transition. The only thing that was really difficult was just passing that darn test.
No, yeah, believe me, there's a reason why that test is a 40% pass rate. Kudos to you for passing it on one try. I wish I could say the same. Nope, I got it. I'm going for my second try on it. And I remember, love the Pocket Prep app, by the way. You were the one who definitely got me onto that. That thing is so helpful just to help like understand and mesmerize, especially when they give the explanation afterwards to every single
Sure.
question. So I think it's great that the Mario Kart thing I think is awesome. But going into like some of the stuff you said, like I 100% agree. And I know you're more in the private sector side, and obviously I'm more in the college sector, where regardless if it's 50-year-old Janet versus, one of my guys on the basketball team, they don't care about the sliding filament theory. They don't care about the difference between the first, second, or third class lever. Even if I tell them this is actually going to work the the femoris and whatever, like they don't really care. I'm like, bro, you're going to get a quad pump and that's what's going to
Sure.
matter and that's going to feel great. That's all they really need to know. But even when you're looking at both sectors, I think what you said, and I say all the time, is the aspect of buy-in is
Mhm.
extremely important. I think it's even more important than actually knowing a lot of the content, because for you to have the buy-in, everybody else is going to sell fitness. We all have the same certifications and the same background and knowledge. So there's very little difference between all of us within that realm. The difference is going to be who we are and how we're getting people to come back. And, I think it's even harder for someone in your shoes, like in the private sector side, because, my kids, they don't have an option if they can come back or not. Like they have to come at 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, 50-year-old Janet or whoever you might be working with, or any person that you have, the opportunity to work with, they have an option on whether, hey, do we go back with Matt or no? So the fact is a lot of selling yourself and creating that buy-in
Mhm.
as a coach. And I think that goes even more to both the strength conditioning world or the sport performance world, as well as the sport specific and the team sport world, that, some of those players, they're going to just be ready to go. They're going to be a kid who's ready to practice and is going to run through the wall, as fast as they can. And you're going to have guys where it's like, listen, like you need to find a way for everybody to come together and say, hey, this is the commonality. This is what we're trying to accomplish. So I feel like that's a big similarity in like what not college, in what sport coaching as well as the training coaching comes into. But I know you also worked with, obviously, a lot of people, I think in a pretty broad range of ages. I see a lot of yourself on social media. You work with some people who might be, in the older senior population. I know you also work with some athletes as well. So I would love to know kind of what your coaching style similarities and maybe some differences are, if you wanted to go down in with that idea between coaching, the 20-year-old soccer player you might be working with versus, 50-year-old Janet over here.
There's two main things to say. One of them reminds me of a meme. So one of them is that like the science doesn't change. The template will stay the same. Athletic training is athletic training. You just have to find the right entry point. I can go down that a little bit more. But then the other thing too is, right, like you can probably in your position give a little bit more of like the stick, and I have to give a bit more of the carrot. Because if someone doesn't like, Coach Matt or whatever, they don't want to work with me. The main time I find a difference in how I coach people is if I'm older than them or they're older than me. For my Gen Pop clients, they're all older than me. They all have more life experience. I can't like preach to them, about like maturity, this, that, or the other. When I have a 13-year-old soccer player I'm working with right now. In that sense, I feel like I can actually have a different approach with how I communicate to him, where it's almost a little bit more mentorship, and I can focus on the character side a little bit more. But I feel like I just can't like preach to people older than me that much. So you got to just be a little bit more soft approach, right? If someone's like not wanting to push themselves, then I'll like make a little joke like, it's okay, you don't have to do that last set. Like the world needs mediocre people too. And then like that might be enough. But if it's the kid, I might just be like, hey, like, what are we doing here? Like get some effort. Do you know what I mean? Like just be a little bit tougher. So yeah, I mean, personal training, like that matters so much. You have to be able to establish these connections. They are paying you. They're not forced to be there. But there are the differences there. And the meme I was thinking of was like you've seen like pad holders for like boxing gyms or whatever. They say if they're working with a private client and like they're not doing very well, they're just gonna be, oh, good job. Like, oh, what a great punch. Oh, wow, you're punching so hard. If they throw like say the client drops their hands, you're supposed to like tag them in the face with a pad to be like, keep your hands up. They'll do like a little gentle tap and then like giggle and all that stuff. But if it's like one of their competitive athletes who's about to get ready for a fight, they're just murdering them with the pads the entire time? And so it's just like a totally different approach. I find that you do have to scale to a person's personality type with that, with how you coach them. And I'm almost like a mirror in that sense. If people are really nice to me, I'll be nice to them. I have some clients that shit talk me quite a bit. So I just, got to dish it back and it is what it is. So you do have to be a bit of a chameleon in that sense. And also just like you learn that from experience. As far as the actual X's and O's, entry points, yeah. I'll have clients train power, I'll have the kid train power, but the kid might do triple broad jumps or he'll do sprints. I'm not going to have somebody who's, uh, you know, 65, hasn't done anything high speed, maybe over a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, whatever, just rip sprints. That's negligent. Like that's actually really stupid. If you want to introduce them into like plyometric activities and like why would a ladder drill or doing like fast speed on a little step be bad? You wouldn't do that with an athlete if like you're saying, oh, we're getting faster. No, that you're selling the wrong thing there. It's a good introduction for some people. Even like really fast bouncy calf raises is a good intro before you do pogos. Pogos is a good intro before you do like kind of quarter squat jumps, right? And you can work down the depth. You can increase the amplitude. People talk about band assisted. I don't love that necessarily because you're still getting them further from the ground. And that's the issue is when they're in the air, they're like, I'm uncomfortable here. How am I going to interact with the ground? It's very foreign. So it's like you keep them close to the ground, you do some extensive work, you can become more intensive over time. But that applies to everything. My mother-in-law started training with me this past week, and she was saying like, take it easy, take it easy, take it easy. I have this, I have that, blah, blah. And I was like, I would be shocked if like you actually are as like, not prepared for physical effort as you say you are, or that like I would actually like overcook a session or something like that. And all we did was like glute bridges, bodyweight squats to a box, cable pull downs with like 20 pounds and like dumbbell shoulder presses with like 10 pounds in either hand. And I'm like, cool. This is our base. We're just going to progress this steadily over time. Progressive overload, general adaptation syndrome, law of specificity. If a trainer knows 3 things, those are the 3 things they should know. Law of specificity. If I'm trying to get faster, bench press probably isn't the best exercise. Sprinting is probably the best exercise. If I'm trying to jump higher, then like cool, but yeah, jump. So yeah, the principles stay the same. You just have to change your approach and your entry points is probably how I'd sum that up.
Yeah, no, I think, when you're talking about too, like, and it was another point I wanted to get into, but one, specificity, we say it all the time that, if you want to get faster, the only way you're going to get faster is if you actually sprint. It's like you can't expect from a sport specific standpoint, if you want to get better at shooting a basketball, you don't just go do dribbling drills. Like you have to actually shoot, like in order for you to actually get better at it. Repetition is the mother of practice, and I think that that's where it's in every aspect of life. Is that the more you practice something, the better you're going to get at it. But you have to start from the basic, and that's where we have those progressions. But obviously, we see that a lot more in training with the different variations. So the calf raises into pogo hops, into maybe quarter squats. And then like even the last thing, like after they maybe are getting as high as they can on like a jump of some sort, then maybe let's do some band assisted because then they can get like 50 inches in the air if you have the right person.
Overspeed, sure.
But I think it was even funny that you said, with you training your mother-in-law that she's like, oh, like let's dial it down. Let's not do too much. Let's not do too much. And it kind of
Yeah.
going back into even like with some of the athletes that you said, and I work with obviously a number of them in my realm is, they think the more and more they do, it's like, all right, like it's either going to be, hey, we need to calm it down. It's almost like 2 versions of the pendulum that, for example, your mother-in-law is like, hey, we can't do too much. And then my guys are on the other side of the pendulum where they don't want to nap or anything.
Mhm.
So it's so interesting that, how some people's, I think, mind is wired a little bit where it's, when you look at something like, you're training and obviously it's going to do one of 2 taxing things. It's either going to be a physically taxing lift that has more physical fatigue, or it's going to be something maybe taxing more to the nervous system. So your CNS fatigue, looking at that
Mhm.
high-low model where
Mhm.
someone with my guys, they have to realize that physical fatigue is not always the best thing for them, especially if we're in season. Like guys, I don't need you ripping like to failure on any exercise. Maybe let's do like 3 by 5 at, an 8 RPE or a 7 RPE because it's only going to prep you. But I think it's so funny that, we can go into it is the idea that some people are like, we have to do the absolute bare minimum because I'm scared to get too bulky or I'm scared to, have this happen or be too sore. And on the other side, we have people that are like, I need to do more. Well, your knees are killing you. Your quads are shot. You probably need to go take a naps. Like trying to manage that. I don't know how many people you might have like who might be on that side of the pendulum, but like how do you kind of manage, it can be your mother-in-law. Not sure if she's gonna listen, but it can be your mother-in-law if you want to use an example, or anyone else who might be like, oh, I don't want to do too much when you as a trainer know like we're not really doing too much. Like you're gonna be a little sore, it's gonna be some DOMS happening, but how do you kind of relate with people and kind of talk to them about that?
So I've had more experience, like you'd say, working with people that are like almost fearful of training. I think part of that is, and we've had this discussion before, like a doctor in like a kind of a mill, like a client mill, will typically say stuff like, "Oh, that hurts. Don't do that." Like, and it's basically preaching avoidance, right? And it's like, well, I preach resiliency. Like my business is called Empower Performance. I want to empower people. I want them to become resilient. I also don't want them to be idiots and get hurt in the process. There really is a huge sweet spot, actually. Like, I don't think people realize that. It's not like this really fine line you're going to tip one way or the other. And like, you're going to be not resilient, you're going to be injured. Like, there's actually a really big sweet spot. And I've had this conversation of minimal effective dose and maximal effective dose. I definitely want to talk about that and like apply it to the athletes in a second. But when it's someone who's kind of afraid, you have to empower them. You have to explain to them that like maybe 3 out of 10 discomfort is acceptable. But past that is like you may actually be injured. You have to gradually, progress the weight, encourage them. The main thing you'll hear from like an adult client is like, oh, I feel it in my back. And then I'll say like, okay, where in your back do you feel it in the joints? And it's like, no, like the two things along the joints. I'm like, oh, you mean the spinal erectors, the muscles? Yeah, it's a physical strain that you're feeling because you're just like kind of weaker in those areas. I don't want to use those words, but I'm like, you gotta get that stronger. You'll feel better. So like if someone has back pain, for example, we start with core stability work. I know people kind of shit on that. It's like, don't do, anti-rotation presses, off presses, whatever term you want to use. They're like a bad exercise. Blah, blah. It's like, I'm going to teach someone how to do that first. I'm going to teach them a plank. I'll teach them a side plank. If they have back pain, especially, give them some awareness of what's even going on there and also how to brace if they're going to squat or deadlift, right? And then from there, slowly introduce them to like core movement. It could be like a side plank dip, like an ab mat crunch, just like a little bit of movement. And then eventually, yeah, I want you to like do full range training of the joints. That creates resiliency. So the other thing too, like I was telling my dad, he's like, you shouldn't lift with a rounded back because maybe I was doing like Jefferson curls, right? And I was like, touch your toes. He touched his toes. I'm like, your back's rounded. Does it hurt? He's like, no. I'm like, grab the 2.5 pound plates. Touch your toes. Does it hurt? No. I'm like, okay. I'm gonna load up the bar for 200 pounds. Do you think that would hurt? He's like, yes. I was like, is it the issue being weighted and range of motion, or is it just the intensity that you're applying to what you're capable of right now? It's just a really simple thing to say. You can get hurt doing something too fast, too much, too heavy, too deep. Like there's lots of ways that you can get hurt. You just don't want to do all those things. You just want to constantly like, it's almost like drinking poison to develop an immunity. Just drink a little bit of poison, just a little bit, right? So you encourage those people. Having said that, the too bulky thing, that thing makes me laugh because I want to say I've never seen it happen. My first client was a rock star. She was the type that you'd almost have to pull back. She was a mother of like a college kid and a high school kid. Hadn't trained in a while, but I mean, she had just tremendous work ethic. And she told me that she had to like stop doing arm exercises because like she was like splitting the seams on her cute tops and all that stuff. And I was like, all right, like it's happened. I finally saw a female client who got too bulky, right? And so I was like, cool. We just did our compound movements into accessory movements for the arms and all that. I'm like, cool. And she was happy. I was happy. But like, it's only ever happened once. Been in business 5 years. I've been training for 7 or 8 years. So yeah, I mean, sometimes like the language matters. If it's someone who doesn't like stress, you don't ask them, do you want to go up? They don't want to go up. You ask them, do you think you can go up or would you try going up? And sometimes you don't. You just add weight and say, hey, I think you can do this. And then they like go, okay, they do it. You tell them, hey, I knew you could do it. Bar speed was great. Great. You're getting more resilient, stronger, whatever. So it really does depend on the approach. As far as people, you got to pull back. You have to explain to them the idea of like overdoing it. So that's where I want to go: minimal effective dose, maximal effective dose. With an athlete in season, in crunch time, basketball is the most important thing, right? It's not your squat PR. You would know this. I think the one thing you do, well, not one, but one thing that you do particularly well is you don't have this huge ego of like having to justify your position to everybody by, okay, we did pre-testing, we did post-testing, you made all these gains. That means that you're better. You know that the most important thing is on-court performance and availability. So when you're in peak season, you're going to do minimal effective dose. You need to keep people healthy, but you want to stimulate, not annihilate, right? If you're out of season, you want to push people, you have plenty of recovery time. I know you talk about the match day model, plus minus and all that stuff. If you have a lot of time before games, you can crush people, right? that's maximal effective dose. It's like, why not squeeze the lemon for every drop? That's fine, but it's just having the knowledge to know when to apply what or who you're working with. Because if you do VBT, if you do RPE, if you do percentage, easy people will cheat it and tough people will overshoot it. And so at the end of the day, that's where the art of coaching comes in because there's no perfect intensity regulation system. You have to know who's doing what. And then you have to pull back the people that are going to run themselves into the ground or hurt themselves, kind of like how I said I was in college doing too much. Someone should almost be like, hey, like take a nap, you eat a sandwich. And then you might have maybe your more skillful players, your wiry players who are like allergic to dumbbells, right? And then you got to push them a little bit. You got to try to say, hey, like you're 160 pounds and you're 6'3", and you're going to run into somebody who's 6'6" and 240. Who's going to get hurt? You know, if he falls on top of you, who's going to get hurt? What happens if you put on 20 pounds of muscle? Are you able to play sports longer because you get injured less because you're more resilient? So again, yeah, it's just how you communicate it, I guess.
Yeah. Some of the stuff from that, obviously, the maximal and minimal effective dose. I know you talked about that with our good friend Josh Bray, who he will be making an appearance at some point on this as well. But honestly, like I feel like it's obviously it's a lot more evident, I think, just out in the plain open view with my realm of working with the college kids and working with those team sport athletes that they have that individual season, compared to maybe a private sector client, who is just looking to make those improvements within their everyday life, So, for example, I know, you just said the match day model, so the match day minus model, forgive me. So for whoever's listening or watching, if you don't know what the match day minus model is, believe me, I've used it. I didn't come up with it. I stole it from somebody else. It's the idea that we're able to just look at the microcycle. So we're looking at a weekly outlook with whatever our game is while we're in season for any sport. We do this with basketball, soccer, hockey, flag football. It doesn't really matter what sport you're playing, or even if you're a combat sport athlete, which I want to get into, and you might have an event or a match that's coming up, that you're going to look at your most important thing, and that's going to be the actual competition itself or the match. And when you're looking at your training overview, that, okay, if you're able to work out day A, B, C, and let's say we have our match specifically on Saturday. All right, well, the further away we are from that competition date, the more we can kind of dial up that, not so much the volume, but maybe dial up the load. I personally like to dial the loads up and down, keeping a low volume while we're in season, because I don't need them exhausted for practice at the same time. And that's where like the minimal effective dose of, okay, what's the least amount of weight we can move in order to achieve the stimulus that is still needed in the weight room. And we're going to stick with that as close as we can to that match day. The further we get, then we can turn up that dosage a little bit more. But then right now, like our guys are in the off season. They're just finishing up their second week of kind of their early off season. And I feel for them. They're doing like 4 sets of 10 front squats and then just peppering like their quad. They're doing a really high volume of lifting, which some of them aren't used to. They haven't been used to that since they got on campus with me back in August because they were in their preseason. So that's where we're able to do that maximal effective dose. But I think when you're looking at anything like that competition or that match day minus model, that's where it's fun to look at those 2 different doses and see the outlook of everything, and then you're able to kind of tailor what we do into what the most important thing is. The most important thing isn't the strength training option.
Mhm.
I'm never driving the bus. I'm lucky if I get a seat in the bus half the time. And I think that's what a lot of like strength coaches try to think, is that it's not always about what we do. We're trying to prep them for what they have to do in the gym or on the field. So always looking at that. But definitely want to kind of segue into what your current training is. So obviously you were sport specific athlete, playing soccer, playing the futsal, all that fun stuff. And now you're into combat sports. One, I applaud you. My buddy is you also are trying to convince me to try it at some point. That I don't know if I can really get on board with that yet. Might need a little bit of time to think about it. But can you kind of talk about basically how you got into the combat sport realm and the changes that maybe your training has been from maybe your college sport days all the way up until, okay, now we have, combat sport, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, all of that.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a couple things that I can like say to that. One of them is as far as convincing you to get into it, you're gonna make the trip down to visit and like get a workout here at some point. And I have the mitts, I have the bags, I have some mats to roll out. So that might be a good way to introduce you to it a little bit because I'm telling you, you catch the bug really fast. I actually started implementing pad work with some of my clients. I always feel I have to say a caveat. I'm not prepping them for like a boxing match. It's not the highest quality thing ever, but there's people that like you put them on an assault bike, they're bored out of their minds or they hate it and they don't want to do their conditioning. I just think, how can I get people like jazzed up about getting the heart rate up, right? I've never seen someone do pads and be like, I don't really like it. They all love it. They get some aggression out, they get some playfulness out. There's a coordination aspect, there's a skill aspect, and I think that's also important for like older clients to maintain that to stay young. It's also almost like power training to an extent, just having to move quickly and rapidly and all that. So the more I can get someone like engaged, we both know Steve White. Steve White was on my podcast. I hope you get him on your podcast soon. He's an absolute dog. But like if you watch how he warms up with his kids, it's very playful. There's a time and place for really simple, really output driven kind of stuff, and then there's a time and place for kind of trying to feel things out, learn new skills, have fun, laugh in the gym, not be so gritty and grindy, right? So anyway, all this to say, when you come down, we're gonna dabble in it a little bit, and you'll hopefully catch the bug and get into it yourself. I think most people should do it. I think women should do it for self defense. I think men should do it to learn to stop running their mouths so much. I think so many dudes think that they're like this big alpha and they haven't been punched in the face or submitted by someone smaller than them enough, right? Having said that, you're talking about how's my training shifted. Yeah, I tried to be like, sports specific when I was a soccer player. I was like, what looks like a sprint stride? So I do like box step up jumps, right? And I was like, okay, that like replicates sprinting. I could also just sprinted. I was like trying to do everything as specific as possible. I was like, man, if I just got the legs really strong and I sprinted and jumped and had more simplicity there, I might have gotten better outputs. I may have gotten, better benefits out of that. And I think I learned my lesson there. With this, I don't try to replicate the sport itself. Part of it too is, I had a kid, so I don't have all the time in the world. And when you're tired and you have to balance your work schedule and all that stuff, you want to have fun in the gym too. So I definitely have templates, but I have a little bit of flexibility there. So it's not necessarily 8 weeks of one exercise and then I switch 8 weeks of the next and all that. If I say I'm going to do a squat one day, I might do a sandbag squat. I might do a flywheel squat. I might do a barbell front squat, back squat, whatever, right? But as long as I hit that pattern and I just get a stimulus, that's the main thing I care about. So more generality is definitely a shift I made, less specificity, but also more variety in the sense that I learned unconventional training just because I wanted to see what that was like. I was curious. I explored it. I see the application. I'm not like only unconventional and no traditional. There's space for both. It's same thing with like different combat sports. You might have a guy that says boxing's best and then he has no like wrestling and gets taken down. He's cooked. So why not train both? So the combat sports that I've done are and never competition. As just a hobbyist, I feel like that's important to note. I just like learning the skills and the fitness and the challenge and the idea of having some level of self defense. Maybe one day I'll do it, but not right now with the baby. I have to help out, right? I've done Muay Thai a little bit. I've done Jiu-Jitsu a little bit because I wanted the most complete striking system and most complete grappling system. And then I've done like MMA where you can blend them together. They're a blast. And MMA was particularly fun because someone's better at striking than you. You just wrap them up and you take them to the ground and maybe have an advantage there. And if they're better at grappling than you just try to stay on your feet, keep the distance and all that. So that's like the biggest kind of chess match because almost anything, basically everything's available at any time. And like setting up submission sometimes is easier too because like Jiu-jitsu, someone can just stay tucked really tight, not leave any space for you to isolate an arm or get their neck or something like that, right? If you punch someone in the face a few times, they're gonna have to do this. And then it's a lot easier to get their arm over their head to like submit it. So all this to say that my training shifted in terms of being more general and using templates as opposed to very specific workouts, but it's also focused a lot more on like survivability, working on like my neck strength and my grip strength a lot more because of jujitsu. Also, if you get like punched in the head, helps to have a strong neck, right? And then your grip gets fried, especially with the gi, which is the traditional uniform in jiu-jitsu. So like the demands change and your demands have to change with that as well. And the other thing too is jiu-jitsu to me was such a foreign thing. I would say Muay Thai is more intuitive. You punch, you kick, you knee, you elbow, and you clinch, right? I think most people can pick up the basics of that in one day. They can understand the concept of it in one day, but it takes a lifetime to master, right? Jiu-jitsu, like if I taught you one technique, it might take like a whole day just to learn one technique. Never mind all the different positions and elements and submissions and then it's like a chess match because you can pair them together, and just like set traps for people and all that stuff. It takes 10 years to get a black belt in jiu-jitsu on average. It's the longest of any martial arts. To me, it's the most complex. And yeah, anyway, so it's the biggest thing I took away from that is you're in contact with the ground so much more and you're lower so much more. And I know we talked about this before, doing crawls and doing, your deep tier plyos and all that stuff, especially for someone who's, 6'8", like a basketball player, something like that. How good is that for them to learn something where they feel like, man, I'm so used to being up here, but I'm not used to being down there. There's a lot of value to it, learning how to fall. I recommend people do it. You can also learn how to move your body in a different way, and it's a fun challenge. Yeah, I hope I answered your question.
No, yeah, you definitely did. It's funny because, like, I love watching like the UFC guys go at it. And I know I know you're always watching it, so, like, you'll typically text me, be like, "Oh, are you watching the fight card?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm watching." But, like, just how pristine some of their movements are and just being so intact with the ground. You have someone who's like a unicorn, like Ilya he's just in a whole different level that he's so well-rounded in his grappling, in his Brazilian jiu-jitsu, his kickboxing, his stamina, power, everything. He's basically like the modern day McGregor. He hasn't reached the mental capacity of it yet, in my
I would say he has even better grappling, yeah, like, I think
yeah,
he'll surpass him, but that's neither here nor there, but yeah, he's a unicorn because he's high level and everything, and then, like, that's one thing that you could talk about as well if you really wanted to, is he doesn't train MMA every day, he trains boxing one day, wrestling one day, jiu-jitsu one day, kickboxing or Muay Thai the next day, and then he will, in a fight camp, mix it all together, so it's like, would you rather get a watered down stimulus forever, or would you rather, like, specialize in everything? So his boxing's better than anybody else's boxing. Jiu-jitsu and ground game is, like, really, really strong, like, that comes from him actually, like, doing each part individually and then combining as opposed to a bit of everything every day, but then it's not the highest level skill work, so and then, yeah, his strength and conditioning's immaculate as well. He is a true professional athlete. Sometimes you see, like, an athlete that can only play their sport because their skill and IQ is so high, but they wouldn't be able to jump in another sport. Well, Braun could play another sport, right? Ilya Taporia to me could play a bunch of different sports because of just how overall athletic he is. So if you're an athlete, you're listening to this, that's the benefit of athleticism. It just makes applying your skills and staying healthy and having that X factor over people, it makes it so much easier. You would say that like if you can take a dude who's really big, strong, and jacked and just teach him how to connect with a golf ball properly, that thing's gonna sail, right? Because physicality matters so much. And then on the flip side, you can have all the skill in the world. Eventually, you're going to be maxed out on your skill, and your body's going to be too weak to hit the ball any further. So, like, you have to attack both sides. And I think that's what makes him special. Is he's done both. Tremendous athlete, tremendous technician.
yeah. His grappling is 10 times better than McGregor's ever was. But and I think what you just said, it makes an amazing point. And I know I put something out, I think on Instagram a little while ago, and I know we've talked about it, but it's a hill I will always die on. And I feel like it's going to end up being my catchphrase at some point is that if we're in a strength conditioning session in the gym, no matter what we're doing, no matter what kind of athlete, if it's someone who is like, Ilya or one of my basketball guys or anybody, like not by looking at them, but just by what their session looks like, we should not be able to tell what sport they play. And I'm going to repeat that for whoever needs to hear it a second time. As a strength and conditioning or personal training professional, your athletes' workouts, for the most part, you should not be able to tell what sport they play based off of their weight room session. And it's because we are trying to enhance the athletic components and whatever they're using. So if we're getting everybody to run faster, to jump higher, build some explosive strength, some maximal strength, put on a little size, get an aerobic and anaerobic conditioning level of some sort, and now when we have everything kind of at the same level or at some kind of level, now at times we can kind of dial like, all right, well, we need this quality a little more for a basketball player. Maybe you have to do a little more on the jumping side and maybe a little more like interval sprinting because that's how the game is compared to, someone who might be I don't even know. Someone who might be maybe like a cyclist or something where they just have to get their aerobic conditioning and their leg power and strength to an absurd level at some point. But at the end of the day, we're able to do that for all of our athletes, but maybe we just put a focus at different points on those qualities specifically. And I'm trying to remember, there was one part that you said earlier that I hope it comes back to me because I wanted to get into it.
If I could go off what you were saying, though, I think this is a fun topic to discuss. I think I've said this before, exercises for general athletes, special exercises for special athletes. Most people are not special athletes. So when you see like a javelin thrower has like a special machine that replicates a javelin, it's like on a track, it looks like a javelin, they sprint and they throw and stuff. That's fine for them. They're special athletes. They have 4 years to do one thing better than anybody else in the world, right? But your average person, you don't need to attach a tennis band to a racket and start swinging it like you're doing a forehand when you can just do heavy rotation, do some pec flies or something like that, and kind of like disintegrate or dissect the movement into its components and just get stronger in those movements. And that's about as specific as you can get, in my opinion, where it could add value. An example of that is one of my clients, she wants to become a park ranger, the law enforcement division, and she has to do all these different tests. And one of the tests is she has to be able to scale a 6-foot wall. And, she's 5'3", and it's a big challenge for her. So I'm like, okay, Well, we looked at what it looks like to scale the wall. It's basically like a jump, a step up, a pull up, and like a dip to get to the top of the wall. And then you just scale, like throw one of your legs over and then you drop without falling on your back, right? I was like, okay, well then we can just train step ups. We can train pull downs. We can do pull ups, whatever variation is better. We can do like assisted dips. We did that today. And then like you could do any jumping variation. We did box jumps in the beginning to reduce landing forces. It wasn't because I'm like, she has to jump on a box. You just jump, reduce landing forces, eventually expose her to more stress. You jump on the ground, land on the ground, maybe do a hurdle where you have to pick your feet up a little bit higher. Technically not more airborne, but it feels like it because you're picking your feet up, so there's a bigger displacement from your feet, which leave the ground and meet the ground again. But that's about as specific as I'll get, and in that instance, I'm getting very specific with her because it's like, "Okay, you have 4 months to do X amount of push-ups, to pass this agility drill, this one drill, not another one, this one drill. You have to run a 1.5-mile test in, like, this amount of time." So it's like, if that's what you need to do, you can get more specific, but the average person should just do like, there's not a basketball squat and a lacrosse squat, right? They're squats. You do the squats, you get the legs strong. Strong legs helps in basketball and lacrosse. So you don't have to like split hairs like that, right? So I totally agree with that there. I think the real distinction is the energy demands. If it's a pitcher, they don't need to be running marathons versus a marathon runner. Like it's totally different energy demands. But then also like key injury sites. Like I said in jujitsu, it might be the forearms and the neck, as opposed to soccer might be the hamstring and the groin, right? But then you can also get into the conversation of rather than sport specific, you can get athlete specific. Because even in the same sport of basketball, your 7 foot guy won't need the same thing as your 6 foot guy, especially if they have like different roles on the team and all that stuff, or they're built totally differently. And then you can also get into the human side of things where it's like, okay, they get a lot of this stimulus from their sports practice and competition alone. Should I really give them more of that in the gym? The answer is probably not. And that's where you were talking about getting your big guys on the ground doing crawls and all that stuff. I mean, unless they're like crawling for a ground ball, that doesn't actually apply specifically to the sport of basketball. But is it something that gives them a different stimulus? It can help with their shoulder health. It can help with their awareness with the ground. It can help them if they're going to fall or get back up again. But you can still think, "Oh, I'm not trying to replicate basketball. I'm not trying to train them for that. They get enough of XYZ stimulus from basketball. Why not give them something they're not getting just to keep them healthy?" So that's one of the interesting things. I think in like off season, preseason, you can get it a little bit more specific to we should be doing your jumping, your change of direction, your conditioning, kind of the stuff you'd see on the court. But once you're in season and you have time with them, maybe they have like a cranky knee, maybe they have this, whatever. Kind of work around it, do other things. You'll never actually hang from the rim, but doing hangs can be good for your shoulders and elbows and wrists if they're cranky. So there's lots of different ways to look at how you should go about your training. And I think it's just about using a balance and using good judgment. And one of the biggest things I learned as a trainer over the past few years was there's not a right split, there's not a right workout template, there's not a right answer. There's not one perspective that applies to everybody equally. And it doesn't have to be the one thing either. You can blend them, however you feel is most appropriate at the time. And you just kind of develop the skill of, like you talk about the dials and the menus all the time. You develop that over time. Just like, did I do too much athlete specific or sport specific as opposed to human specific or whatever. So just play with that until you feel comfortable and confident. That also depends on how your athlete responds. And that's to me the true art of coaching is you apply stimulus, you see how the athlete responds to the stimulus. If it's good, you stick with it as long as you can until that stimulus starts to like the well starts to run dry. Then you just move on to something else. And that gets into like the movement variety. If someone likes a barbell deadlift and their numbers are going up, we're going to do it until the numbers start to dry out. And then we can play with the rep scheme, the intensity. You want to do a banded version, you want to do a trap bar. Like that's kind of how I look at it is you don't have to change the whole muscle confusion thing is a myth. You don't have to have a different workout every time. You have to repeat things to get better. And you don't have to change every 4 weeks or 6 weeks if that's what you do, just because it ended. You can stick with it if you're still getting the stimulus. You just have to communicate it with the athlete and see that they're still on board.
The idea of getting the athletes, on the ground and having them kind of have a feeling for it. And I think someone who we both watch a lot and know their content pretty well, Vernon Griffith, he said at the Coach 'em Up conference that I had an opportunity to go to last year. He did a whole presentation and made a great point. And it was the idea that, your athletes have to spend time on the ground. So specifically from like a basketball standpoint, the more you think about it, they actually spend a lot of time on the ground from taking a charge, diving for a loose ball, just falling down and getting back up. Having them have that opportunity to kind of feel what being in contact with the ground is like, even if it's for a warm up of some sort, like they're doing bear crawls or duck walks, being in that such deep tier, but anything like that. I started to do that a lot with our guys, and I think the first time we ever did it, they probably questioned my mentality. They're like, Is he okay? Like, is he mental right now? But when I was like, this is allowing, your shoulders to be able to feel something that maybe they're not getting from a shoulder press or from a bench press or, the traditional sagittal and frontal plane movements that maybe, we're not really getting, and we're allowing our shoulder joint to explore those different areas where if for some reason you do get into that area, it's not gonna overdo. It's not gonna be that strenuous. Obviously we can't prevent an injury from happening, but they can kind of feel that full range of motion and those different ranges of motion. So I think when athletes are able to kind of spend some time on the ground or maybe kind of get into those unconventional spots, even if it's just from a stretching standpoint and a warming up, that they're able to kind of be exposed a little bit to the chaos aspect that sport actually provides, because what we do is not as chaotic as what the actual demands of the sport, no matter what it is, that they can actually do. So that actually did trigger in my memory about that. But one of the other things I wanted to get into also was, you know, after all this time, you've had your business for 5 years, you have a wife, and, you now have a son who, God, I love whenever you send me a picture of him. Georgie's the cutest. But, having all this plus your own podcast and kind of how it's been, I would say probably the last 3 months, but even before that, when you started up the podcast kind of last year, what it's been like, trying to have your own business,
Mhm.
have a family, have the podcast, kind of just balancing everything as much as you can. Because I'm gonna give you credit, man. You were doing a lot, and it's a lot of high quality stuff. So, I want to make sure you know that. But how have you? How can you like balance all of that, and how has it been trying to balance a lot of different things?
So first of all, I appreciate that. Balance is like a word that I really believe in, and just in multiple aspects. Hypothetically, if you were going to ask me this question at the end, if you have any piece of advice, what would it be? I kind of wanted to go in this direction anyway, which would have been, I'm a person who believes in well-roundedness. I always say this quote. They always say, "Jack of all trades, master of none." But the rest of the quote is, "Jack of all trades, master of none. Oftentimes better than a master of one." And so, if all I could do is sprint, but I get tired going up the stairs, I would hate when I go up the stairs. I hate that feeling. So I try to be good at everything, whether it's fitness, but also outside of fitness. I think health is more than just physical, it's also mental and emotional. So do things that like go for a walk with your dog and don't have music or a podcast and just like be in your head and kind of listen to the birds and all that stuff. You can also like, try to make some time for friends and all that. If you have a hobby that helps you relax, that's good. Work on your mental and emotional health as well. Like you don't just do it passively, you can also do it actively, right? Challenge your thoughts, challenge your beliefs, try to be open minded, get outside your comfort zone physically, mentally, emotionally. But then there's also spiritual health for some people if that really matters to them, right? You can read books, you can go out in nature, you can pray, you can go to church, temple, whatever your building would be called, for lack of better words, your place of worship, and then also financial. Like people talk about money, and like this hustle culture thing. People would be like, "Oh, I make like $10 million a year," and this and that. That's cool. For me, when I was 13, maybe I thought the mansion and like the Bugatti would be like the coolest thing ever, right? But like, I actually was never a huge car guy anyway. But now, like, I have the kid, like you're talking about. I have more bills, so I have to work more. But then also, he's growing so fast, I don't want to miss a moment. And so if the question was, make an extra $5,000 a year, or I get to be there to see him like take his first steps or see him smile or whatever, like, you have to decide through your priorities what's important to you. And that balance isn't the same for everybody. So like I've always thought I'd rather have like a good relationship with they're my priorities, my family, right? A really good relationship with all them, and then enjoy my work and be providing valuable services to clients. I used to think I need to be the best trainer in the world. It's like, well, what if I do achieve that, but then I lose the family in the process because I'm spending all my time working and studying and all that? Is it worth it then? The answer is no. Or what if you see some people, my dad was a good example of he worked a ton, immigrant father, came here, no education. I've told his story a few times. Started in the warehouse at a shipping business, and he now owns this business with like 30 employees. It's a really cool kind of American dream story. But he wasn't around a lot when I was growing up because he was working all the time. And he also wasn't able to, like, take care of his health the most because of how much he sacrificed for that. And so now he has to try to, like, regain the health, and he's working on it, it's good, but you have to ask yourself, like, is it worth it, right? Some people will say, "I need to make $10 million to feel like I have enough," and they'll say, "Once I'm 65, I'll retire, I'll live life." And they're too out of shape to actually, like, go and enjoy and travel all these experiences that they plan to have, or maybe they dropped dead of a heart attack at 50, so balance is relative to an individual, and it's hard to find, but it's important to pursue, I guess is what I'd say. And then also I feel better when I don't feel like total trash in a certain area as opposed to feeling really good at the expense of other areas. So
I mean,
that's kind of what I'd say to that.
like you do 1,000 things, and it's I feel like at times like I spread myself too thin. Like you told me like before, you're like, "Oh, I give you credit for everything you're doing." Like I have to tell myself at times, because I no, I don't have a family, I don't have a wife, I don't have a kid that I know about of any sort, so obviously I'm going through a lot of different stuff, outside of this, that I have and just work with a lot of different athletes. And, I try to have to tell myself, like, hey, like, you're 25, man. Like, you got to kind of enjoy it a little bit. You're going to work for the rest of your life in general. You're going to work for, another 20, 30, 40 years. You gotta kind of enjoy all those little moments that, you're only going to get one opportunity at and get one chance at. So, that definitely, the balance aspect is huge.
There's like a little fable that kind of helps people. It's from The Alchemist. It's a little story within that story where there's this like young man who goes to this wise king and he's like, I want to learn like the secret to happiness and all that stuff. And he's like, okay, I'll tell you in 2 hours. In the meantime, can you do me a favor? The young guy's like, sure, I'll do whatever you want. He's like, take this spoon. There's a bit of oil in the spoon. I want you to uh, like walk around my palace until I'm ready to meet with you. So the kid does it, comes back, and he's like, "All right, I'm ready to hear the secret of happiness." King is like, "I'll tell you in a second, but like, did you enjoy walking around my palace? Like, it's really beautiful. I have all these flowers and trees and bushes and paintings and architecture and all that stuff." And then the guy was like, "Oh, no, I was like too busy looking at the spoon the whole time." And then he's like, "Okay, well, I'll meet with you in 2 more hours. Just like, go ahead, walk around and like enjoy everything that I told you to." Right? Kid comes back and he's like, "Hey, like, did you like it?" He's like, "Yeah, it's beautiful. Like, I didn't notice all these things. Really wonderful stuff." And he's like, "Cool. Can I have my oil and my spoon back?" And he's like, "Shit, I dropped the oil." Is like, I was so distracted by everything. He's like, cool. So he's like, the purpose to life, the secret to life is to be able to focus on the spoon and the oil and still see everything. And so it's kind of like the whole like stop to smell the roses. It's cool being busy. It's cool, especially like the stage of life you're in. We're not very different in age, but you're still in a different stage with without like the wife and the kid. Dude, full send. Do it. This is the time, right? Before you have to like start sharing your attention with other people and other things, right? But eventually you get to that spot and it's like any spot that you're at in life, like you can be super driven and focus on the work and all that stuff, but eventually you do have to be able to just like pause and look around a little bit and enjoy it. So that's kind of the advice I give to anybody listening is like kind of audit yourself. Are you not working enough and you're smelling the roses? But then like life, you still need to pay bills, you still need to make money, you still need to work hard, right?
I would love to get into a few segments. I know we've been talking shop for the last, hour 10 plus some minor technical difficulties. So that's always the fun time. This is the first time for everything. So this segment is brought to you by nobody because it's the first episode and we're not sponsored by anybody yet. So we will accept sponsors, but yeah, let's see how let's actually have people listen to this. So the first thing I want to ask you, and I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, was what would you say is the major change in the one difference I think in your coaching style from when you started coaching people, about yeah, let's even throw in the internship. So when you started the whole coaching atmosphere, what's the one biggest change or one of the biggest change that you've had from when you started coaching to where you are now?
This sounds almost like backwards advice, but be wrong. Like it's okay to be wrong and it's okay to suck at things. The only way to get better is to put yourself out there and to take a couple L's. And, I say wins and lessons, not wins and losses. If you have the mentality that's like, it's not going to be perfect at the start, and you can learn along the way. That's kind of what it was with the podcast is I used to be a perfectionist and I use that term as if it was like a badge of honor, but it's almost like this arrogant thing because it's like, you would never start perfect, which just means you don't start anything, and it's just, that's not how life works. So I told myself with the podcast, if I record an episode and it's 80% perfect, I'm going to release it. And then from there, if I can get it 81%, 82%, whatever, it'll grow over time. And it may never actually be 100%. In fact, I don't think perfection exists at all. It's just kind of the pursuit of growth. And also like this whole comparison thing, compare you with you. I know people say that all the time, but like it's really important. Comparison is the thief of joy. You can learn from other people, but you shouldn't copy them or you shouldn't envy them. There's always going to be someone who has more than you, someone who has less than you. So like I would say, even if you want more, be grateful for what you have. If you need to listen to a song, J. Cole, Love Yours, it's very helpful for that. But all this stuff matters. I would basically say like, be wrong. I used to think I read one book and I was like, okay, this is right. Everybody else is wrong. I see someone on Instagram, be like, that's stupid. And the more you take yourself out of that and you're just like, okay, I'll give it a shot. Like I said, with unconventional training for a long time, like, what's the point? You're not going to get the same load as you can on a barbell or a machine, right? And then I spoke to an unconventional coach and he's like, I don't really care about optimal. It's like optimal is almost like this myth or it's elusive or it doesn't work for everybody. Preference matters as well. He's like, laws of adaptation still apply with whatever's in your hand, right? He's like, I'm more mobile, I'm fitter, I'm stronger, I'm more jacked, I'm getting everything I want. I'm doing with a couple kettlebells as opposed to a barbell. So it doesn't really matter that much. And that was so like liberating for me. I was telling you about the human like way of looking at training, the athlete, the sports specific side. And I used to think, what's the right answer? What's the right split? What's the best exercise? What's this, that, the other? Doesn't exist. And that's so liberating to just be like, hey, like do something that's really good that people can adhere to, get the buy-in, get the effort, get the drive. The body will adapt positively. Doesn't really matter if it's like people talk about if it's not 100%, I won't do it at all. Okay. Well, 60% done to 60% is better than 100% done to 50% or not done at all, right? It's almost like the idea your teachers will say, turn in your homework even if it's incomplete because it won't crush your grade as bad as if you don't turn in the homework at all. So like that's just maybe the biggest change I've had is the personal change, which has then affected the professional side of things because I think the way you are as a coach is really just a reflection of who you are as a person. And sometimes that's like what people are really paying for. They're not paying for the program that you wrote or the way that you coach a squat. They're paying for the person coaching it. So I would just say like work on who you are and it'll help, I guess, everything in life. And yeah, just like, I don't know, like don't get too high with the highs, don't get too low with the lows. A lot of people think they're hot shit and they're half right, you know? So just like try to be
Yeah.
humble.
No, yeah, be wrong.
Yeah,
Absolutely love it.
be
Also,
wrong.
everybody needs to know, do not coach the program, coach the athlete. I know I said that on an Instagram post recently, but yeah, that's the most important thing because newsflash, if you're waiting for someone to write the perfect program, it doesn't exist. There's no perfect split. You want to do 4-day upper lower versus a push pull legs 5-day or 6-day or a full body 3-day. Guess what? Just do something. You're going to be, it's going to be better than doing nothing. You know, you have to start something. Perfection doesn't exist. You want to strive to perfection, that's great, but being perfect doesn't exist. So yeah, I love the be wrong changes, you know. So this next one, I feel like we both listen to Coach 'em Up. I feel like everybody has done this. A rant and rave. So what's something, we'll start with a rant. What's something in the industry that you see that you're every time that, you know, Empower Performance goes to post on Instagram and now you're waiting and it's posting and you see something else under, you're like, I never want to see this ever again in my life. I don't want this to ever come up in an algorithm. So what's something that you want to rant or have a feeling towards that's like, please stop it. And then on the flip side, let's do something positive. What's something that you want to see more of?
Like I almost have two rants, but they're kind of connected. It's just being like sleazy in this industry. So I don't like when people make claims that are just totally BS. I think functional patterns or something said that like his training methodology will help human evolution. You can live to 300 years old. And I'm like, you spinning around on a cable machine isn't going to make someone live to 300. It's crazy that you'd even try to make a claim like that or sell that to anybody. People who swear that their system will bulletproof you, uh, I also think is like really sleazy. I say it's not bulletproof unless I shoot you with a bullet. And like, it doesn't hurt you at all. I just think that's like injuries happen. That's part of life. Like I'd rather not fear monger the risk of injury, just tell people like it'll happen. What can we do in the presence of injury? How can you work around the injury? How can you rehabilitate the injury? I think that's a much more positive mentality with those negative things than just saying, oh, I can keep you from it ever happening. But then on the, I guess the other side of that, the second part of the rant is there's so many different ways to train. Like I said, like, you know, I hope I can work with as many people as possible, but I'm not for everybody. Not everybody's for me. Me being a generalist means that I probably wouldn't be the best for specialist. So it's like, yeah, we might do some bodybuilding stuff, powerlifting stuff, Olympic weightlifting stuff. If you're going to compete in Mr. Olympia, you should probably get a specialist to help you prepare for that, right? Having said that, that doesn't mean that because I don't train the way they do, I have to say they're dumb, they're bad, blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that, to try to sell myself by putting other people down. Can just appreciate people, like community, not competition, like I said. So I don't like when people just tear each other down, especially over really stupid things. I'm not going to mention the coaches in particular, but there's two coaches that I unfollowed. They were friends and they got into a public beef over squat mechanics. At what point do you have more IR versus ER? Like, what client gives a shit about that, right? Like, it doesn't matter to anybody, and you're gonna get personal and attack each other's families and say, "Oh, this person's on steroids, this person's on drugs, or whatever." It's not worth it. No one cares about it. Like, get the ego out of the way. If someone says something, water off a duck's back. I just wish that like we just focused on instead of like our echo chamber, just like what actually moves the industry forward. How can we focus more on the positive sides? My business is called Empower Performance because I want people to focus on what they can do and not what they can't do. There's stuff I can't do. It doesn't help me to be like, "Oh, I can't dunk," and then feel sad about it forever, right? Like, I can work towards jumping higher and maybe one day I get there, but I don't know. I just think it's that mentality of like positivity versus negativity. And as far as the positivity thing, the last thing I'll say about it is, I wish people would have optimism with realism. I think that's the most dangerous and beneficial combination. If it's optimism without realism, then you're deluding yourself and you're not going to really make that much progress. If it's pessimism, then why bother doing anything? You're nihilistic. What's the point of anything, right? That doesn't help anybody. So just be like, okay, realism to me is knowing how much water is in the glass, and optimism is looking at the water in the glass. So like glass half full, glass half empty. You can be glass half full, but what if it's 20% full? Then I'm going to focus on the 20% full as opposed to 80% empty. And I think that's a really helpful kind of mental strategy that people can take into life. As far as a rave, you're going to definitely experience this podcast, and you've had it from being a guest on other people's podcasts, and I've had it myself. I've really enjoyed making these connections and meeting people and hearing different stories and different ways about going about things. And the really nice thing about being a generalist is you can find like the ability to connect the dots and find the through lines, right? Like what exists in multiple sports, what exists in um, multiple training modalities and styles and philosophies and all that stuff. And there's something to that. If people have different ways of doing something, they still can agree on one main thing. That tends to be true. And where they kind of diverge tends to be more subjective, right? That's not always the case. But I would just say that like I like how many great people and great coaches I've met. I've met you through uh, through Ben because he told me about you from the Coach 'em Up conference that you guys went to. But like you have experienced that from that conference as well. That like maybe you think, man, I'm the only trainer in my town that like whatever that I would get along with, right? And it's like now I have friends in Arkansas and Connecticut and New York and California and all this. It's been a really cool venture. So I just say like open yourself up. I'm naturally very introverted. This got me out of my shell. Get to meet more people. Makes you more hopeful that there's like more decent people out there in the world because your algorithm will tell you that people are left or they're right. They're this or that. And I'll just show you like the extremes. There's a lot of people in the middle that are like really good, decent people. And this has been great for showing me that and making me more hopeful. And you get that too from the combat sports world. When you're done trying to kill somebody and they're done trying to kill you, you guys are sitting up against the wall trying to catch your breath. I've had some of the most like honest conversations with like originally strangers through that. So yeah, I guess just be open minded, meet different people. That's definitely a rave. And this has allowed me to do that. And I think that social media, as bad as it can be in the ways that I've said, can also be a positive thing because it gives you the opportunity to make these connections. And I've grown as a person from the things I've learned as a coach through social media, through conversations I've had, through the people I've met. So yeah, I'd say that's my rave.
I've had my own thing with social media and, I always say it's a blessing and a curse. I think social media, it's a blessing because, that's how we connected. That's how, we've connected with Ben and, the whole run club. That's how we got our thing going, shout out run club. And, even other people that we have a lot of mutual people that have appeared on your podcast and just trainers that we know, people that I got to meet down at Coach 'em Up who are all over the country and the world, so getting to have that community building is huge. And I think that's just a huge thing in our industry. And then the ranting side, yeah, there's no such thing as bulletproof. I love that quote that you always do, the bulletproof, and then let me just shoot you. That's become one of my favorite things because you say that even when you text it to me, like, 'cause we'll text and send each other things, and you'll be like, "Yeah, bulletproof. Yeah, right, buddy." Like, what happens when there's an actual bullet in there? I'm like, this is one of the best. It always gets me laughing, but like that's real. Like the functional patterns or the go-to people. Like, I'm not gonna say bad things, but I'll say bad things about them because they're wrong. Especially when Goto was doing all this stuff and saying that we're bulletproofing people, and then Micah Parsons like just completely tore any ligament that he had, or the saying that the Halliburton or Jason Tatum injuries could have been prevented if they did their program. And it's like, how low of a life and how low of a person do you need to be to say that? There, newsflash to anyone who's also listening to this, I've experienced it myself. There are zero programs that exist that completely prevent injury. They'll reduce maybe the reduction of injury, but I've even said it before with what we do, where the odds of people getting hurt in our facilities and our practice is substantially a lot lower of a percentage than what they're going to do out in the field because of the chaos, and we're allowed to control a little more of the environment compared to what sport actually
Chaos.
does. So yeah, shout out to not Goda and functional patterns because they're not good people at all. But yeah, and then the last thing I wanted to do, you kind of said the advice to your younger self. What advice would you give to a young coach who, is looking potentially to go in the exact same footsteps? You can give one piece of advice to anyone who's looking to do something similar in your path. What piece of advice are you giving them?
I get the reps. That's the most cliche thing. It's the most important thing. I learned more from doing the thing and just reflecting and experience and all that. You can tell a coach is coach because they'll say things that you can only get from the reps themselves. So I had Zach Newbell on the podcast recently. He was talking about like sprinting, and I teach sprinting and all that stuff, and we're talking about like the sound of people hitting the ground properly. And like they don't teach that in a textbook. They don't say it sounds like this in a textbook. You can tell a coach is coach or someone who's actually put in the reps, just from those like small things that matter. It was one of the things I actually want to talk about earlier is today I was doing a field session with the kids. So we're doing like, dynamic warm up. We're doing some plyos. We're doing some speed and agility. And when we got to conditioning, we're both soccer backgrounds. He's a 13-year-old soccer player. I'm a former soccer player. I was like, we can do conditioning with the ball today. So I was just setting up some finishing drills for him. And it was such a simple drill, but it was how I coached the drill that I thought I've seen when I was a skills coach, because I did that for a bit. I would just get a bag of balls, some pug goals, some cones, and I can get kids doing some really good, like realistic work through all that, improving the fundamentals. And I saw another skills coach on the other side of the field with all the skills equipment, SKLZ, the brand. So he has like these circuits where it's like, oh, I'm going to get the speed harness with the parachute and the ladder and then the rebounder. And then you're going to have the net that like has the corners cut out. So you can only score in the corners, and give them this needlessly complex drill that the kid was just trying to finish as opposed to like develop. And I just gave this kid a drill today where he's a striker. He just lays the ball off to me, makes a run in behind, I play him a through ball, and he finishes on goal. Within that unbelievably simple drill, like you can actually focus on the elements of the game that matter most, which would be like, okay, well, how's your touch setting you up? How are you going about your finishing? What are you looking for from the goalkeeper? Like those small details, that to me is like real coaching. And you only get that through the reps. And you have to suck sometimes and just do it and do it and do it and do it and do it until you can develop and harness this skill. So if I were to say anything to somebody who wants to do this, I thought every cert would make me better than everybody else. I think like, I'm not trying to brag. I think I have like 8 certs or something like that. It doesn't really matter that much. I could have just gone the CSCS and left it there and then just like, read books, listened to podcasts, got the reps, had a mentorship, whatever. Mentors help too. I can't say that I have like tons of mentors or like one key mentor. I definitely had my internship with Clay Mefford and he was great, but and then Ben has been helpful in that sense too. I have a lot of people, but that's what Instagram's been good for too, is I would just DM any coach, any question I ever had, and if it got back to me, cool. They didn't owe me a response. But I've learned just through that, through like speaking to as many people as possible. But yeah, it's like, yes, be curious, but ultimately knowledge without application isn't knowledge. To know and not to do is not to know. So you have to do the damn thing. You can't read something and be like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and then never apply it. If you saw a video of an exercise and you didn't try it out, you wouldn't know if you like it or not until you try it out. So I would just say like studying is cool, all that stuff is cool, but like you got to do the damn thing a lot to get good at it. So get the reps. That's the main thing I tell a young coach. Do it and learn and grow, and then just keep putting yourself out in that situation.
It actually is funny because this upcoming week, our applied exercise science professor at the school, he's teaching a strength and conditioning class and utilizing the CSCS textbook. And he and we've had plenty of conversations. And he's like, "Listen, I can only teach them so much in the classroom, but he's like, I have, a doctorate in nutrition, and I'm, obviously on the science side, but from the actual practical application side, that's not really my expertise." And he's like, "That is your expertise." So literally for like 2 weeks, I'm taking over his class and actually bringing them into the weight room and like, hey, like this is what we're doing, just allowing them to get reps. And I tell these kids like, what you're going to learn in the textbook, not everything you're doing is by the textbook. Like a match day minus model is not in the textbook. Some of the stuff that we've learned because we've done the reps, it's not textbook based. And that's just because we've done enough repetitions. And I'm still really early in my career, but we've done enough repetitions to kind of know, optimal isn't always the best. And you even said it, it's more practical versus optimal. And practical is going to end up outlaying that 10 out of 10 times. So yeah, I think that's great. But yeah, man, this was great. This was awesome. I really appreciate you having you on. Last thing, I'm gonna let you plug yourself. Where can people reach out to you, connect with you, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, Instagram, Facebook, Empower Performance One, like the number one. And then YouTube, if you look up Empower Performance, you should find me. And then my podcast is called the Empower Performance Podcast. It's all pretty on brand. It's not like a bunch of different like names and stuff. Yeah, reach out to me. I'm happy to connect. My goal is to help as many people as possible, even if it's just like a DM and I send a voice message back or something like that. This like my purpose and passion is just to help people. But ultimately, so that people can do it themselves. I think the best referral I can ever have is someone doesn't need to train with me anymore, and they have a passion for fitness, and they have a knowledge for fitness. They have a good basis of technique. They know how to put a workout together themselves, and then they just like keep doing it forever, as opposed to like just hypothetically like a good therapist. My wife is a mental health counselor. A good therapist should like be able to discharge you, right? A bad one will want you to come back forever because it's good job security. So yeah, like reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to as many people as possible. This is fun for me. And then I also just want to say that like, yeah, you're saying you're not very far in your career. I wanted to touch on that. Yes, chronologically, no, like you're not very far in your career, but if you're talking like the volume of work that a person has done, you may have done more work in a couple years than someone may do in like a decade. And I was talking about getting the reps. You are a good example of getting the reps. And that's just only going to accelerate your growth as opposed to somebody else. So that's a wonderful thing. And then I also want to commend you too for doing this podcast because it's hard to put yourself out there. Uh, and it's a good thing to do. It's a good venture. You're going to grow faster than somebody who just sits on the sidelines and listens to a podcast and like, oh, I disagree with what he says, but doesn't have the stones to make their own podcast and put their own thoughts out there. So I wanted to commend you for that. And then I also just like, I'm looking forward to the episodes you put out. I like hearing, you were on Josh Bray's podcast. I was listening to that as well, mutual friend. I like hearing my friends talk, especially because I think my friends have good ideas. So I'm looking forward to more episodes and then just hearing how you feel that this has benefited you, this venture yourselves. I want to thank you for being on the podcast. If you ever want to do like a run club roundtable or
Now,
something like that, I'm
listen,
not
we
sure if
have
you
a
have an idea
note
in your mind.
page
I
with
think that'd
all
be
the
a fun
people we
time.
want. Run Club Roundtable. I'm putting it out there first. Let's get everybody on the Run Club, get their own appearance first, and then we're getting right to it. We're gonna have to book out like 3 hours for that, by the way.
Yeah,
But yeah, Matt, appreciate you, man.
sure.
And definitely appreciate all the kind words. But
Appreciate you.
yeah, guys, thank you for tuning in and listening or watching. This is on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. If you're not a subscriber, just go ahead and subscribe. Just listen. It's free for you guys. It's great. It's fun talking to other coaches. But appreciate all the love so far from this early venture, and we will see you next time.